Good evening, everyone. I just want to welcome you all to the Founders Academy Public Charter School. Thank you for joining us this evening for this event. We're really excited to have everybody here. And with that, I'm going to pass it off to co-founder of Moms for Liberty, Tiffany Justice.
Thank you very much. Welcome, everyone. This is a packed house. This is so exciting, Nikki. Look at all these friendly faces in the room.
It really is. And, you know, people in New Hampshire have said, oh, you brought the heat with you from South Carolina. So let me tell you how to handle South Carolina heat. We don't sweat, we glisten. So you guys can handle it. And when I'm like unable to handle the winters here, y'all can tell me what to do, because I know, I started coming here. I announced February 15th. So I started coming in like March, and it was cold. And it just stayed cold and stayed cold and stayed cold. So I'm enjoying the warm weather, but I know y'all are ready for the cold weather. So
no doubt. So my name is Tiffany Justice, as Cassie said. Today was the first day of school for Founders Academy. So let's give Founders Academy a big round of applause for hosting us tonight. It has been a long day for Cassie. There is no doubt about it. So Moms for Liberty is a nonprofit grassroots organization. Our mission is to unify, educate, and empower parents to defend their parental rights at all levels of government. And that is exactly what we are doing. We just had a wonderful roundtable with education advocates, a lawyer, and some moms. And Cassie joined us as well. And we talked about some of the issues that are affecting you here in New Hampshire. These are not unique issues to just New Hampshire. Some of the issues that you guys are struggling with here, educational failure in your public schools, issues about secrets being kept from parents, this is happening all over our country. And so knowing that, Nikki, you are a champion for moms and dads, and that you have a real you're really keeping the pulse on this issue, and are you're tackling these issues head on. We appreciate that as parents. So we're really excited to hear from you today.
thank you. Well, first of all, I'll say Tiffany is what I hope every American realizes they can do, is when she saw a problem, when she saw the issues happening in schools, she didn't just say something. She rallied all the parents that saw the same problems. And how many members do you have now?
We have over 120,000 members. We just added Idaho, so we only have 3 states to go. So now we're in 47 states.
I mean, so when they say one person can't do something, look at what she did, and thank God you did it. It's God's work.
I'm going to give credit. So Tina Deskovich is the co-founder of Moms for Liberty, and we have an amazing national team that helps. And it's really the moms and dads on the ground. The truth of the matter is, I'm a mom of 4, and I served on school board in my local community, and I realized that public education was broken. And so running for office as a woman, right, as a mom, is a big responsibility. And now you're running for president of the United States of America, putting parents back in charge. And so just give us some thoughts. What were your thoughts from the roundtable today?
Well, first of all, the roundtable is always insightful, but I come to this as a mom. I mean, it's one of those things that we have one job as parents, and that's to make sure that we keep our kids safe, that we raise them in a way that they can make the most of their life with every opportunity and be successful. That's really our number one job. And so when I see what's happening in schools now, we have to end this chaotic cycle, because no parent should ever wonder what's being said or taught to their child in the classroom. We need full transparency in the classroom, always. The second thing is we need parents to be able to decide which schools their kids go to. You look at Cassie in this amazing charter school. Having opportunities like that, when you know all kids don't fit in the same mold, making sure that there are options, that matters. But we're coming off of a situation where kids were mandated to wear masks. So think about these kids in kindergarten, where a lot of what they're learning is facial expressions, and you couldn't see the teacher's face. And then you wonder why we're having this social anxiety, because the kids got scared through that. They didn't know what it meant. They just knew they had to do it. And so in their minds, it was a really scary situation for them. Then we saw what happened when you did online schooling. What a mess that was, right? And God bless the teachers. The teachers did the very best they could. I mean, teachers are given so much right now. They now have to be the pastor and the nurse and the guidance counselor and the teacher, and they have to teach to a test. I mean, it's all of these things, these pressures that are there. But you have these school bureaucrats and these unions, teachers' unions. And what bothers me is they're trying to take custody of our kids. And we can't allow that to happen. They're our kids. We make the decisions on what happens in their day-to-day life. And to see this slippery slope suddenly feel like we're falling off of a cliff, it's going to take all of us to fix this, because our kids deserve better than what they're getting. I was talking to a senior at a New Hampshire school the last time I was here. And she kind of, at the end of the town hall, she kind of took me to the side and she said, you know, in every class I go to, they talk about transgenderism. And she said, it's fine. She said, but I feel like I'm walking on eggshells because I don't know what to say. And I'm scared if I say the wrong thing that people are going to get upset. That is the last thing I want her worrying about in school. I want her thinking about how she's comfortable in her skin. I want her growing her confidence. I want her to trust in her ability to think for herself. That's what I want. And I want our kids learning reading, math, science, and history. Not all of these other things. And so what I think this is doing, that I think Tiffany and Tina did an amazing job starting, let's don't let it end. Because now we're seeing this creeping back in. One, where they're deciding what they should teach us in school. Now, I will tell you, I didn't have sex ed until 7th grade. And even then, you had to have a parent sign a permission slip before you could take that class. And my dad wouldn't sign it, so I was the uncool kid in the classroom next door. But that's the parent's role. That's not for the schools to decide. And now we're getting to a point where schools think they know better than the parents. We can't have that happen. And so what we're doing here today is to talk about the strength of people who stand up and say, we're going to do something about it. All of us using the powers of our voices, but correcting this and making sure we reverse this trend and put parents back in charge where they belong and make sure that our kids are healthy and safe in the process.
Absolutely. And so we have a saying at Moms for Liberty: we do not co-parent with the government. A message to President Biden, if he's listening: we do not co-parent with the government, sir. And it's time for parents to stand up and push back. One of the things that we've asked candidates and elected officials to do is sign something called a parent pledge. And I brought one with me today. This is it, if you'd like to see it. So if you know someone running for office, you can go to our website. You can download this. They can sign it. And if you send it in, we'll list that on the website so you can go and see, has your elected official or candidate sign this pledge. And Nikki, I'm just going to read it to you for a second before you sign it. So what we say is, what we're asking you to pledge is to honor the fundamental rights of parents, including but not limited to the right to direct the education, medical care, and moral upbringing of their children. Seems pretty simple, right? I pledge to advance policies that strengthen parental involvement in decision-making, increase transparency, defend against government overreach, and secure parental rights at all levels of government. And we would just love if you would sign the parent pledge for us.
Absolutely, I will sign it.
Thank you.
But I want to say this too. This is not a Republican or Democrat issue. Every parent, regardless of their education, regardless of where they're from, knows what's best for their child. I trust every parent. When you give birth, or you're the spouse that have been with the woman that's given birth, you know all of that process. When that happens, we have it ingrained in us what we need to do to protect that child. And so I trust every parent. I don't think government needs to judge every parent. I don't think that this should be Republican or Democrat. And the reason why I bring that up is Joe Biden just attacked me, saying that I was being a MAGA extremist for doing an event with Moms for Liberty. And if Joe Biden thinks I'm being a MAGA extremist for being a mom for liberty, then count me as one of them. Because we have to be extreme when it comes to our kids.
Thank you for that, Nikki. We appreciate it. So we're really excited to take some questions. I hope you've brought your questions tonight. We talked about a lot of different issues in the roundtable that are affecting you and your families and your community. And so I'm sure we're going to have some really interesting questions. Thank you, Nikki, for signing that. Oh, I'm sorry. I said 26. I'm sorry. The 6. I apologize. Wonderful. Thank you so much for that.
Of course. And we will take questions. There is nothing we won't answer, so don't be shy, because if you're thinking it, someone else is thinking it too. Andrew has the mic, Miles has a mic, and so we'll let y'all go ahead and start.
Hi, Nikki.
Hi.
My name's Rachel. I noticed that in 2014, you reallocated around $200 million in South Carolina from other places to your K through 12 systems. With that education reform, what does that look like at scale at the federal level?
So it was actual education reform. And what we did at that point was we knew if a child couldn't read by 3rd grade, they were 4 times less likely to graduate high school. And we saw a lot of our kids were not able to read by 3rd grade, and they were pushing them forward. So what we did was we created a system where we held those kids back. We brought in reading remediation. We brought in their parents, and we set them up for success. And it was the fact, you can't keep pushing these kids through just to say, check, I did it. Because guess what? At the end of the day, if these kids can't read, they're not going to be able to get a job. They're not going to be successful. They're not going to be able to contribute to society the way they deserve to be, successful. So we did reading remediation. I think we need to do that all over the country, especially since what's happened with COVID. But more than that, being a governor, I saw that a lot of what happens in D.C., they come up with these big ideas and they push it down to the states and say, if you teach this, we'll give you this much money. If you teach this, we'll give you this much money. If you teach critical race theory, we'll give you this much money. That's the wrong approach. What I will do is we will take those funds from the Department of Education and send it to the states. Let's take away the power of the federal government, reduce that size of the Department of Education, and empower the parents on the ground, empower the people in those states. That way you're getting it closer to the kids. More money is actually going to teaching, and then you can control what's being said and taught to your child in the classroom. You know, I strongly believe we have to bring vocational classes back into the high school. In South Carolina, we were teaching our kids to build the things we were making. We had apprenticeships all over. But guess what? Vocational classes in South Carolina would look different than vocational classes in New Hampshire. So send that money to the states and let New Hampshire decide what that vocational class looks like. Let every state decide that. Think about that when it comes to special education. Think about that when it comes to reading programs. Think about that, what that means in terms of innovation. Think about what that means in terms of all of these issues that we want our kids to excel at. When we suddenly reduce that big Department of Education and you use that money that you're paying for to actually go to the kids that we want it to go to.
Instead of pushing boys into girls' sports and things of that nature, because they're not really giving a choice anymore. They're just mandating.
No, and I think that it's incredibly dangerous when we look. I will always fight for girls. I have said, as long as I can remember, strong girls become strong women. Strong women become strong leaders. And I will continue to say that. And every time I hear someone's got a daughter, I always say, raise a strong girl, because it's important. And the idea that you've got these girls who've worked so long to get to the point in their high school career and then have a biological boy step up who's physiologically going to be different. Have them step up and take over all that hard work that they've done. And then you're going to go and say, oh, and they get to change in your locker room? My daughter ran track in high school. I played tennis in high school. I don't even know how I would have that conversation with my daughter. How do we get them used to biological boys in their locker rooms? You can't. And so why do that to them? Why focus on that? And so, you know, the priorities have been lost in our education system. And it's really simple. You go back to the basics. We need to be focusing on beating China, beating India, making our kids smart enough to topple them, not sit there and worry about whether we're hurting someone's feelings. That's not what this is supposed to be. Hi.
So my question is, in our educational setting right now, our special needs children are being left behind drastically. They do not have their one-on-one help. Their IEPs are not being met. We have children who are behavioral. We have children with autism. We have children all over the spectrum who aren't even getting an ounce of what they need into our public school systems. What is something that you could bring forth that's going to help these children thrive instead of redistricting these children because these school districts can't handle them?
Or even having to move these kids to another state. You know, if you have a child with autism, and we know that those therapies early on can really make a difference with those kids, if you don't have those therapies, think of what a family goes through when they want to do as much for their child and they have to look at moving because your state doesn't provide it. A lot of that is look at the waste that's going to DC and think about if we actually had that money go to support the child that they need. Every child is different and special in their own way. And whatever challenges they have, parents need to feel like there's a support system, not just one teacher. You need to feel like you've got a guidance counselor there, a reading support there. You've got someone who can help them if they've got dyslexia. You've got someone who can help if they've got challenges, someone who's constantly looking to see what their improvement is. You should feel like you have a team at your school, not someone else for you to fight to help your child. And so it's all about prioritization. And I will tell you, this is not rocket science. We are parents. We know what our kids need. It's just get that support around them. The problem is when you get so many bureaucrats that are so detached from what it is, then they're sending down what they think is scholarly to tell you. But they're not sending down what's the practical, help that you need. And I think when that money is sent down, not with strings attached, but with the idea that states have a basic right to give you support for any child that has a special needs at the full level, not at a partial level. They have to have the environment for that child to thrive. They have to teach the basic academics of math, reading, science, history. They have to set you up for a job, not just to go to a college or a university because that's what you're supposed to do. That they actually go and teach your kids how to think, not what to think. That's where we need to go. This isn't going to be that hard. But what it does take is you got to clean out the Department of Education. We got to clean it out completely. And when you do that, that's when magic happens. When I was governor, everybody said, oh, what legislation are you going to do? That's the wrong question to ask. The first thing you do is you control what you can control. So I went into all of my agencies. I replaced the head of every agency. And then I sent people into every agency to clean it up. Pull down bureaucracy, pull down red tape, get rid of problem children, streamline it down, and create benchmarks every 90 days to prove to the taxpayer that they were getting a return on investment. Some agencies we tweaked, some agencies we gutted. But guess what? Then the legislature saw what we did, and they knew there was a new tone. When Congress sees us do that same thing with these agencies, and they see that we're pushing down these block grants to the states, it will set a new tone in D.C. to let them know that government's meant to work for the people, not the other way around.
Speaking of that, so Moms for Liberty endorses in school board races. And what you just talked about, pushing that money down, is going to make running for school board even more important. It doesn't matter if you don't have kids in school. You need to get involved. If you're going to run for office, run for school board. The change that we can make in America happens in our own backyards. And as that money comes down, if you're able to make that happen, then we're going to need smart, liberty-minded people serving in local office to make sure that the money is being spent in a way that respects parents and puts parents in charge.
And the first line of defense is your school board. And I'll tell you, go to your school board meeting and see how few parents are there. And that's where all the decisions are made. And those decisions are being made without you. Use the power of your voice to say something. And I will tell you, when we were looking to do education reform in South Carolina, I met with all the groups. I met with teachers. I met with superintendents. I met with principals. I met with teachers' unions, and we met with school boards. The group that was the hardest, the most stubborn, and the most closed-minded, school boards. They didn't want anything to change. They thought they knew what was best. They didn't want you to question the spending. They didn't want you to question their programming. They didn't want you to question anything. That's why we need real, normal people to run. I mean, I'm a big proponent of normal people running for office. But
My husband's going to be so happy you called me normal.
You are normal. You are normal. And that's why I think that it is, you're exactly right. School boards are the first line of defense. And so I had, he was actually here in New Hampshire. There was a gentleman who came to one of the events. He was helping us with security. And he said, I'm running for school board. And I said, you are? And I said, good for you. I said, why? He said, because they canceled the father-daughter dance. And he said, and I had had enough, and I decided to run. I loved that. I loved that because he was making a point to do something about it and not complain about it.
Okay, thanks. Number one, our state deserves a lot of credit because they got enough money to offer the letters training for all teachers, parents, and grandparents, and volunteers to learn the proper way to teach reading. Because we have kids who don't get help until they're behind 2 years, which is a lifetime for a little kid. And the other thing I wanted to ask you is, what are you looking forward to in the next debate? You were stunning when you called out a couple of people who really screwed up and thought that they could just overvote Congress and wipe out the FBI, things like that.
Well, first, do you want to answer the first question in terms of education that she said?
No, I mean, you're right. The letters training is so incredibly important. Training the teachers properly in the science of reading so that every child can read. 95% of children have the ability to learn to read, but we have in our country right now 2/3 of children that are not proficient in reading. There is no greater security threat, in my opinion, in the United States than a nation of illiterate people.
Exactly. And when they masked up those teachers, kids have to look at the teachers, the mouth, the phonics, everything about that. We set them back even further with that. And not only reading, our kids need to learn to write. Do you remember how many times we had to do the A's, bless you, and the B's and all? Now kids, it doesn't matter whether they write from top to bottom or bottom to top. All of those things, they don't learn cursive anymore. Like they changed all of that. And so there's a lot just going back to the basics that matters. Debates, I hope you got to watch it. I will tell you that I love debates because it gives you the opportunity to see what your options are. And it lets you see everybody side by side. It lets you see our mannerisms. It lets you see how we communicate. It lets you see what our ideas are. But as a candidate, you don't know what you're going to get. You don't know how the moderators are going to be. You don't know what the topics are going to be. And you don't know what the chemistry on the stage is. But what you saw on the debate stage is what I've done my entire life. I speak hard truths. I don't try and do what people think is popular necessarily. I speak my hard truth on what it is. I want you to have every fact on the table so that you can make the decision. And then I let the chips fall where they may. So when I see or hear something wrong, I'm going to call it out. I did that as governor. I did it as ambassador. I'm going to do it as your president. And so in the next debate, I think things will shift. We don't know, again, how the moderators will be, what the topics will be, or what the strategies of each candidate may change and shift. But what I can promise you is this is the best debate prep I could ever get. I've done over 80 town halls in Iowa and New Hampshire. I think we've done 50 here. The questions you ask me, the information you give me, it's the best information to get your pulse on what real people feel and think. And so I think, to me, this is debate prep for the next one. Because again, you hope that they're going to have a conversation about education, and we did some of that.
We'd like to see more questions about education and parental rights next time.
As much as our kids are suffering, whether it's mental health issues, whether it's on the basics, whether it's going forward, whether it's on the spending in education, we want to see and hear all of that. but I will continue to do as much as I can to get that message out. But thank you very much.
Hey, welcome to Manchester, Nikki.
Thank you.
I'm Mark, and I'm from Manchester.
Hi, Mark.
Since you're interested in tennis, Madison Keys is up a break.
Oh,
in
good.
Europe.
Good to know.
I'm glad you brought up transgenderism. It was an issue here in New Hampshire. It was fought twice, and if I'm correct, transgender rights are recognized in schools, and transgender people can play on whatever sports teams they want. So are you going to recognize the state decisions when it comes to that, or are you going to dictate it from Washington when you're president?
It's a great question, because at the end of the day, I think states need to be the ones that decide everything. But the point of an agency, what you always want to do is give them their sole mission of what they are supposed to do and what should be the Department of Education's mission: to teach our kids the basics so that they can be successful contributors to society. That's what we want. That's the simplified version. Anything outside of that, they're not meant to parent. They're not meant to do anything that doesn't involve those basic core concepts of education. And so I think that's how the Department of Education has gotten so big. And it's not just DC. It happens in legislatures too. We have to be really careful. I'll tell you, when I was in the legislature, everybody was worried about obesity. Do y'all remember when obesity was like the big thing Department of Education was pushing down? Obesity was an issue. Kids weren't getting enough activity. They weren't outside enough. And so there was legislation that was passed in the State House that would require kids to have more physical activity. And they were going to get nutritional classes. So everybody there was like, well, that makes sense. You know, more physical activity during the school year, more nutritional classes, that's fine. Biggest lesson I ever learned. Because what happened was, what sounded good, 3 months later, 6 months later, when it was all enacted, I had teachers from around the state contact me and say, can we talk to you about what this is? And I said, absolutely. So I met with another legislator. We had a full roundtable just listening to teachers. And they said, do you know what we're doing? And I said, no, tell me. What the Department of Education, or the State Department of Education, did, they took that bill and translated it into, they would have a video camera sent to every school, and they had to video every single child doing 10 push-ups, 10 sit-ups, 10 jumping jacks, all that. Then that videotape had to be sent back to the Capitol, to the State Department of Education, for a department to review that child doing exercises. 1, look at the waste. 2, look at how complicated they made it. And 3, that goes to show, don't assume anything. That's the biggest lesson out of that. It taught me the biggest lesson: don't leave it on an agency to make these decisions for you. It needs to be very specific. It needs to be very black and white on what you expect. And at the end of the day, I think government breaks more than it fixes. They really do. It's better to keep life simple in terms of government. And so that was the biggest lesson that I have. So when I'll tell you with transgenderism, let's remember too, I believe in freedom. I believe in your state motto, live free or die. If an adult decides that they want to transition, they are welcome to do that. But we're talking about kids. You can't even get a tattoo until you're 18. You have to have parental permission for that. So let's be really careful before we even get, I think it's such a slippery slope that parents don't want that part talked about at school. They want to talk about it as parents. They want to deal with it in their own way. But I don't want to leave it up to someone else to go and teach my kids about that. I want to be the one that talks to them about that. And that's the part that I think is so important, is I don't even think that needs to be in K through 12 at all. I think that's where parents need to be in, and parents need to be making that decision.
70% of America agrees with you. We just did some national polling, and overwhelmingly, the American people feel that it needs to be a clearer boundary between school and home.
It's good to know.
I have a question.
Hi, Nikki. My name is Liz Barber. I'm here from Hollis, New Hampshire. It's a pleasure to have you here.
Thank you, Liz.
You just spoke about the unintended consequences of good intentions. That's government from top to bottom. So you gave a great example of how government has failed our kids on so many different levels. Will you abolish the federal Department of Education and bring it down to the states? They didn't exist until Jimmy Carter put them in place. Do we really need this bureaucracy between the teachers and the parents and the teachers and the students? My experience is that teachers love to teach their craft. They have removed the craft of teaching
So true.
on every single level, and our children are suffering, and ultimately the United States suffers. So will you talk about the idea of, does the federal Department of Education have value? And if you think that this is a time to remove or dissolve or downgrade, can you tell us how you're going to do that?
So I have always, again, spoken hard truths, and I will give you the information as to why I think what I think. First of all, my son-in-law, my daughter just got married. My son-in-law is a 5th grade school teacher. And to see the pressures that are put on teachers now, I mean, we all should realize teachers' unions are one thing, and I think they're middlemen, and they're hurting the entire system. And I think that they really are not a friend to teachers, and they're not a friend to parents. But the second thing is, we need to remember the sacrifices of teachers, because their lives are really hard right now. And we're watching a lot of them leave because that's not what they went to school to do. When it comes to the Department of Education, a president can't abolish the Department of Education. So who can? Congress. What has Congress done for you lately? So I'm being honest with you. Do I trust that Congress would do that? No. So what would we do instead? Control the agencies. I can move all those programs down to the states. You can do it in block grants where there's no requirements. You just say you've got this much money for special education. This is how much gets sent to New Hampshire, and New Hampshire decides how to do it. That's the way I think we can deal with it, is you actually pull down all of those core functions and send it to the states. So while I can't abolish an agency, I sure can clean it up and get rid of all the guts of it. So you do it, yes. So the block grants would say, okay, this is how much you get for academics. The state can decide what that looks like. This is how much you get for special education. The states decide how to do that. But look at what we do. We're completely reducing the size of the Department of Education. You don't let all those people stay there. You reduce the size of the Department of Education, and you say, okay, then what should they be doing? They should be telling us how our kids can excel past India and China. They should be telling us how we can use new advanced equipment or technology. They should be telling us what skills our kids need to learn for the jobs in the next decade or couple of decades. I think it should be more that than mandating anything. I don't want Department of Education in DC to mandate anything down to the states. I think the locals, now listen, it'll be a political battle, much like what you're seeing at school boards and everything else. I would rather you have that battle here at home where you can show up to a meeting than in DC where you won't ever see any of the people making these decisions on our parents. So I appreciate with the thought concept of what you're saying, but I'm being practical with you on, okay, what could we do to neuter the Department of Education? You neuter it by block granting all of that and just sending it down to the states and let the states take care of it.
If Secretary Cardona comes in through New Hampshire, I want you all to go and look online. He posted a playlist. Did you see this? Secretary Cardona, the Secretary of Education, posted a playlist. It's called the DOPE playlist, the Defense of Public Education playlist that he's going to play on the bus. He's on a bus tour right now. And if you look at the songs that are on that list, it's one thing to put music on, to go run, to go work out. If you listen to the words in these songs and the things that the people who are rapping in the songs or singing in the songs say about women, about the police, the vulgarity. And this is the Secretary of Education, Nikki.
And if he put that same energy in figuring out how to get our kids reading again, think about that. But it's all about, now it's just a PR stunt. And we've seen this. And quite honestly, it's not just the Department of Education. We're seeing all the cabinet agencies are all doing these PR stunts, trying to tell you the economy really is good. Your groceries really aren't expensive. Your gas really isn't expensive. They think if they say it enough times, you'll believe it. But we'll believe it when we look at our grocery store receipts. We believe it at the gas pump. We believe it when our kids come home and they're talking about something and you're like, where did they get that from? Hi.
Nancy from New Boston. How you
Hi,
doing?
Nancy. Good.
I have gone up to the State House here in New Hampshire and spoken on many education issues.
Good for you.
Trying, thanks to Anne Marie over here. She's my she's my sponsor. My question or my concern is I've always asked, where's the line? I feel like there's no more a line in the classroom. I was a teacher for 15 years. There were topics that we never talked about. We never expressed. Parents never talked about in front of their kids. I am sure your father also said, the parents are talking, the kids need to leave the room. Our biggest concern right now is the social emotional learning that is being pushed into different school districts. Just found out our district hired someone specifically to push that into every classroom. They are taking classroom time up for this right now. And we are also finding out from other people that they are collecting data on our children and then they are sharing it. How are you going to provide privacy for our students? Because in our day, we always heard about that permanent record and we always thought that's going to follow us for life. Now our children are going to have a permanent record that could possibly follow them for their life and could affect them if they went to go get a job or got a loan or any other manner of being an adult. So how are you going to protect our children's rights?
Do you remember, and I don't know if they still do this, they did this, my son is now a senior in college, but they did it all through school, that you would have to sign a permission slip just to show a photograph of your child. Do you remember that? Because if they would sometimes publish pictures of students, you could sign, no, I don't want my child's picture in there, or yes. How did we get from there to that? Think about that. That now they're going to go and talk about the mental health of your child, and you don't even know what they're saying, what they're doing, any of those things. It should be no different than HIPAA, and we should treat it like that. So in a HIPAA scenario, if your child goes to the hospital, their case is just theirs, it's private, and the parents know about it, and they discuss it with their doctor. That should be the same thing in schools. Your child should have what is a HIPAA for anything related to their education. I don't want anything discussed, even academics or otherwise. That's between the parent, the child, and the teacher, and nothing else. It's not that complicated. If you could do that in healthcare, you could do it to protect our kids. The idea, we have too much oversharing now. Social media, I mean, you see it in the fact that when you say one word, all of a sudden you're getting ads about it. Think about it. You see, if your kids are on TikTok, the Chinese Communist Party is watching everything they do, how they think, what they click on, what they respond to, and they feed what they want our kids to see, which is nothing good. And so we have to start really taking back control of what happens to our kids and how they're treated. It's abuse of a sort. The fact that they're being so reckless with our kids. And so we have to go and be hard back to make sure that we take responsibility back and that they can't have permission on anything with our children without our permission.
Last question, I think, over right here.
Oh, make it a good one.
Hi, my name's Marcia.
Hi, Marcia.
I'm from Hopkinton. So I'm glad you talked about the limitations to bringing down the federal Department of Education. We all know education is a state's right. You also talked about Congress. So within all of that is the Elementary and Secondary Education Act, which pulls together so much of the responsibilities of a state Department of Ed for federal title programs, Title I, Title II, 3, 4, 5, right? And the allocations that states get that go to districts along with those federal title programs. So in your vision, what happens to those federal title programs and the money that's going to school districts? And is that, when you talk about a block grant, is that money or is that something else?
So think about if you looked at the entire funding pool and you made it all transparent. And when I say transparent, including the strings attached. So if a state gets money, you have to do these things to get that money, or you have to do those things. Our goal would be when you reestablish the mission of the Department of Education and you simplify all of that, then all of a sudden you're taking away all those strings. You would do top line things. So those Title IX, when you think of things like that, those basic things that require or allow a child to get a good education, those things will always be the criteria. We don't want a state going rogue and doing whatever they want in any way, right? So there's got to be some accountability there, but it doesn't have to be so granular that it's telling you what textbook to use and how you do it and what books are in your library and all those other. What we want, just the basics. And I say this as much for the students as I do for the teachers. We are not getting the recruitment of teachers, good quality teachers in the classroom because of the pressure that's coming down on them. So when we make it transparent, we will be able to see what really educates a child, what keeps a child safe, what allows for transparency in the classroom, and what allows parents to have control over all that. And the rest of it doesn't need to be there. And so there would be accountability, just like we see accountability with charter schools like here, or accountability with homeschoolers. We have that too. You've got a lot more homeschoolers now than we ever saw before. So you would have those top lines, but I don't think that we need to have people going so far in saying, oh, but include this, but include that. That's what got us into this mess. The more basic, the more simple, the more empowered parents and students will be.
I've got one last question for you. So you're a mom.
I am.
You're the only mom running for president of the United States of America.
I think we need a mom in the White House, I will just say.
Moms get stuff done, right? Nobody's going to fight for anything like a mom. I see it every day.
We multitask, we're overprotective, we're results oriented, we get it done. I agree.
I would imagine you were very involved in your children's education when they were growing up. Yes. So back to school, as we said, today was the first day here at Founders Academy. We've got kids going back to school or are already back in school all over the United States. Give us some mom advice. What should moms and dads and parents be looking for, and how should they be engaging with school districts going forward?
Well, all I can do is tell you what I did as a mom. And, we all try and get it right. We don't get it perfect, but this is what I did. When our kids were young, and they were starting school, we always took them the day before to meet their teacher, to kind of calm their nerves, make sure that they knew. I wanted the teacher to see my face too. And I wanted our kids to see who their teacher was so that we could talk to them about that. And then in elementary school, it's all about getting their confidence up, strengthening them, letting them know you've got them, but to go push forward. And so you really do kind of let them become their own little person. By the time you get to middle school, same thing. We would still go the day before. That was always kind of my ritual. We would go the day before and then we would get ice cream after. It was something that we did. Middle school was the time where my kids would always come sit on my bed in elementary school. In middle school, they stopped coming sitting on mine and I started sitting on theirs. Because the key is to keep them talking. Boys don't want to talk as much as girls. Girls will just go at it. But at the end of the day, if you're there, when something happens, they're going to tell you. If you're not there, they're going to internalize it and deal with it on their own. And then as they got into high school and they started really encountering the pressures, when my kids would come to me and say, what do? I would always say, how do you think you should handle that? So rather than being, I always would hold back, even though, we want to do that. We want to tell them, we want to save them. I would always say, well, how would you handle it? One, it allows us to understand what level of thinking they are. It creates a bigger discussion rather than just saying you should do this. You suddenly have that conversation and they start to trust themselves more. And they believe in coming back and talking to you because they don't think they're going to get in trouble. They don't think that you're going to go yell at them or say you should do. They think you're going to have a conversation. That served us well. Michael and I always did that. We gave our kids options when they were younger and said, okay, somebody told me, they were like, oh, my child, like everything is an issue, like just figuring out the outfit for school. And I said, you know what we did? We put 2 outfits in front of them and we were like, which one are you wearing tomorrow? And it in their own way empowered them. And it kept us from having to fight over what they wore. And so I think trusting your kids, you raise them well, trust their gut, but be their guardrails. That's what we want to do, is always be their guardrails. And it's such a blessing to be a parent. And so I think that's why all of us here, we care about what happens, not just to our kids, to everybody's kids. Because once you've raised children, you feel for every parent out there, it's not easy. And especially now with all the social pressures and the depression and the anxiety, all those things, we have to do more to protect our kids.
Thank you so much for joining us today and inviting me to come and be with you. And thank you to everyone in the audience for asking some great questions and coming out to support us.
Well, and I want to say this. First of all, will you give your information for Moms for Liberty? Because I would love for y'all to know more about how you can find out about the organization, how you can get involved, all of that.
Yeah, you can go to momsforliberty.org. There's a big map there. You have a chapter here in Hillsborough County. We could use 8 more chapters in New Hampshire. So let's get going in that. Call your friends and let's make sure that the Live Free or Die state has good representation for parents. But go to that website and you can follow us on social media.
And the second thing I will say is schools have a lot they have to go through, but charter schools are an amazing option and they do so much with so little. Cassie, will you let everyone here know there are things you need for the school? Can you give them the website they can go to so that they can all thank you by helping you with what's in the school?
Yes. Thank you very much, and thank you for being here and joining us today. So there are brochures for our school if you're interested in our mission and what we have to offer to the students in New Hampshire. You're welcome to take one on your way out. Our website is www.thefoundersacademy.org. We do have a donations page, and we're always looking for volunteers and supports for our school and for our students in New Hampshire. So thank you again, and thank you all for joining us.
Thank you. And I don't need to tell you too much about the Founders Academy, but this will tell you enough. Their mascot is Sam the Eagle, and everything about this school is wrapped in patriotism and love for America. And so if you ever wanted to support a school and the teachers and what their mission is, it's this one. So I hope you'll take the time to do that. And for me, I will tell you, thank you for coming out. Thank you for caring. Thank you for being a part of this. We have a country to save, but we can do this. But in order to do it, we've got to really do the hard work to get there. So if you liked what we had to say today and you like what I have to say today, go tell 10 people. Tell them to go to NikkiHaley.com. Tell them to volunteer. Tell them to join our Women for Nikki. Tell them to join our Veterans for Nikki or anything, or give $5, $10, $25. If you don't like what I've had to say today, don't say anything and don't tell anyone you were here. God bless you all. Thank you so much.